welcome everyone. This is Sabrina Paganoni. I'm an ALS physician researcher. I'm talking to you from Boston in the US. Really excited to be back with the community from Argentina. I gave a few talks to this, with this community in the past, and it's great to be able to connect online. I hope to come and visit you one day in person. So let's plan on that, hopefully. Today, I want to, again, continue the conversation that we started a few months ago when I was sharing some ideas about clinical trials for ALS. And as always, when I come and join your group, I provide updates from our work that we do in collaboration with many other colleagues in the US and throughout the world. So with that, I will start sharing the screen. I'm going to be talking specifically today about a trial called the Healey ALS platform trial. I believe I presented the overall design and plan on this screen before. And so again, today I'm just happy to provide some updates as of May 2023. I actually gave the same updates at the American Academy of Neurology conference that happened last week in Boston, where really, all ALS experts from around the world gathered to discuss updates and research. This was not the only presentation, obviously, that was presented at the conference, but this is really the most up-to-date kind of presentation that I'm happy to share with you so that you also know all the latest about the trial. And so with that, I'll share my screen. And so again, I presented sort of these results. In the past, I think I presented the design, and today I'm happy to present some of the first results, and we continue to learn. So really, this is work that continues, and I'm happy to be here for an update. Again, I'm Sabrina Paganoni. I work at the Healey and AMG Center for ALS in Boston, and we do this work collaboratively with a large group of physicians, researchers, industry partners. I'm the co-principal investigator of the trial, and it's a great honor for me to work with Dr. Mary Sukovich, who is the principal investigator and sponsor of the trial. And here on this slide, I'm disclosing our funding. This trial is funded by several pharmaceutical companies, as well as different donors, foundations, groups that have come together to support the trial. So today I want to cover 4 points. I want to briefly recap the design and launch of the trial. Why are we doing the trial? Specifically, that's the main question for the first section. And then I want to transition to our first results, both as a platform trial and also results in terms of regimens, which are the specific drugs. I also want to very much focus on what's next because we continue to grow and expand. So first of all, the Healey ALS platform trial, as the title says, here is a multi-stakeholder partnership to accelerate ALS drug development. So let me start by sharing why this is the right time for this type of trial, which is different from previous trials for ALS. As you know, people with ALS don't have time. They live on the ALS clock, which is much faster than the human time clock. And this became clear to Mr. Sean Healey, who named our center and the trial, in 2018. In 2018, he was diagnosed with ALS and realized as a successful businessman that the field was just too slow. So he partnered with Dr. Sukovich, who was his physician, to rethink the way trials are done in ALS. And Dr. Sukovich had this idea of looking at cancer research, where platform trials had already been started, and they had resulted in significant savings across the board in terms of time, money saved, and patient resources saved. And so we did a few simulations and looked at what the effect of testing drugs using the platform concept would be as opposed to traditional trials that had been done before. And she realized that we could really cut down in terms of the time it takes to develop new treatments. We could essentially test more drugs faster. So we realized that platform trials have several advantages over traditional trials. And so that was 2018. In 2019, we worked with multiple stakeholders to launch the trial. So we worked with the patient community, with industry, with foundations, with sites, investigators, and the FDA, always keeping patients front and centered. And we realized that this is the perfect time for a trial in ALS because we have so many drugs in development, which is different from what was happening before. Before, we didn't have many drugs in development, and that's why there wasn't much progress. But now we have so many drugs in development that we need to find ways to make progress faster. And that's really why we decided to really do this trial, because really not only is it more efficient in theory, but also practically speaking, we have so many drugs to screen that unless we find a more efficient way to do so, it will take a long time to really make progress. And that brings us to today. So today, the Healey ALS platform trial is grounded in robust academia industry partnerships with multiple groups from universities, pharmaceutical industry, and patient groups coming together to support the trial. So let me tell you what this is and how this works. So we have a common protocol and a shared infrastructure to test multiple drugs. That's the fundamental difference between a platform trial and any other trial. So in a platform trial, we can use the same protocol, the same house, the same foundations to test multiple drugs, which is different from the traditional approach where we had to build a house around each new drug. And that was inefficient because you have to build a whole house every time you want to test only one drug. Instead, we built a house in 2020, actually, at the beginning of the pandemic. And once we opened it, we could accommodate many guests. So in 2020, we started testing 3 drugs. Each drug is called a regimen. So we tested drugs A, B, and C. We started that in 2020. Then using the same house, the same infrastructure, the same foundations, we added drug D, the 4th drug in 2021. Then we added drug number 5 or regimen E in 2022, and now we're testing drugs F and G. So far we have included 7 drugs, but we have much more room in the house, and we are continuing to receive more guests and test more drugs. And so essentially, why is this efficient? Well, because we have one protocol, one ethics committee, a central governance structure, a shared infrastructure that can really give us operational and scientific efficiencies. Because rather than having to reinvent the wheel every single time we want to test a new drug or new regimen, we can use the same house to test multiple drugs or multiple regimens. And so far we've tested 7, as I said, but we continue to grow. We have included over 70 enrolling sites, so clinics that can actually accommodate, enroll patients. And in fact, we have consented over 1,000 patients. So let me go back and tell you more about why we think we need more than one drug for ALS. So this is a cartoon representing some of the mechanisms or cellular biological mechanisms that are thought to cause ALS. So if you look at the nerve cell represented on the slide, we know that there's many different mechanisms that are implicated in degeneration or ALS. And so we want to tackle all of them one by one. So the first drug or the first regimen that we included was called zilucoplan. It was made by a company called UCB, and it addresses the complement. The second drug, verdiperstat, made by Biohaven, targets myeloperoxidase, and both the complement and myeloperoxidase are part of something called neuroinflammation. So there is a neuroinflammation component to ALS, and both drugs try to target that. Then the third drug, CNM-Au8, made by Clean, targets energy production. The fourth drug, pridopidine, made by Prilenia, targets the sigma-1 receptors. The drug number 5, or regimen E, Trialose, made by Silos Therapeutics, targets autophagy. And finally, the new drugs that are made by Calico and Denali, respectively, there's 2 different drugs, 2 different regimens. They both target the integrated stress response. So why am I saying this? I'm saying this to mention that essentially there's a lot that we don't know in ALS, but there's also a lot that we know. We know that there's many mechanisms that cause ALS. And so we want to try to sort of screen drugs sort of one by one by using using this efficient platform to be able to tell which of these mechanisms is most important, and most importantly for patients, which of these mechanisms can be leveraged for therapeutic purposes. So let me tell you more about how this works. So essentially, every regimen is compared to a common placebo. Let me tell you how this works. So from the point of view of a participant or a patient with ALS, when that person decides to enroll in the platform trial, that person will be assigned to any of the regimens or different drugs that are available in the platform at that time. And then there is a second level randomization where the participant is randomized active to placebo in a 3-to-1 ratio. What does that mean? It means that there are more people on active compared to people on placebo. In fact, for every 4 people who enter the platform trial, only 1 receives placebo, which is a big advantage compared to standalone trials, where oftentimes the chances of being on active or placebo are 50-50, so 1-to-1. Instead, here we have 75% of people going on active and only 25% going on placebo. And then because we use the same house, the same common infrastructure, we can also do something that's not possible in regular standalone trials. We can use a common shared placebo group. And that shared placebo group continues to grow as new regimens are added. So that also allows us to do 2 things. Number one, we reduce the number of people that are needed to be on placebo because we have this common placebo group and we compare each active drug to the common placebo. That's a big advantage from a patient perspective. The second advantage is that we also have this shared placebo group that continues to grow. And it's really a fantastic natural history study that allows us to learn more about ALS. We can do this because we keep the target population or the group of participants constant, essentially. So we have key eligibility criteria that are the same across the different regimens. So let me tell you more about the objective of each regimen. So the objective of each regimen is to provide a go, no-go decision for each drug. So we, as I said, we compare drug to common placebo that lasts 6 months per participant. So whenever somebody enrolls in the trial, they are on either active or placebo for 6 months or 24 weeks, which is about 6 months. And then they receive active access to active as part of the active treatment extension, and that's a long term. We measure several things. We measure the primary endpoint in the placebo-controlled period is called a change from baseline in disease severity. So essentially, we use a measure of function and survival to look at how each drug impacts the disease. So the primary goal really is to see if the drug slows down the disease or not. But then we also have a number of other endpoints, including measures of respiratory function, muscle strength, survival, biomarkers. So we're really taking a broad view at the effects of each drug. So certainly the impact on survival and function in this trial is important, but also we want to make sure that we really have a comprehensive assessment of each drug, so that we can learn more. I want to mention that this trial is more in the phase 2 space. So this is probably not going to be the end of the testing period for each drug. In other words, drug development works in different phases, 1, 2, and 3, with 3 being the definitive. This is more in the phase 2 space. So we're doing an efficient phase 2 screening to tell if drugs work or not. And so if they work, then they probably have to go to phase 3 testing to confirm the results. So the value of the platform trial is not only to move drugs along from phase 2 to phase 3, but also to rapidly screen out drugs that are unlikely to be successful. So with so many drugs in development, we cannot bring all drugs to phase 3. Otherwise, it would take too long and too many people to really tell if drugs work or not. So we have this rapid phase 2 trial, and then we have this interim analysis for futility, which is a little bit of a technical term. But what this means is that while we're doing the trial, we're also actively monitoring drugs for lack of efficacy. Obviously, we wish they're all effective, but we also want to make sure that we have a system in place to rapidly remove ineffective drugs from the system. And that's what we're doing with this interim analysis. So let me share some of our learnings. So first of all, we learned that patients are interested in innovative research. I do want to put a plug in for our patient navigator team. They've been in contact with patients from countries from all over the world who want to have information about ALS research. I know that also people from Argentina call them as well. So you're welcome to call them also as a central resource if you are interested in continuing to learn more about this trial. We do have weekly webinars every Thursday. They are in English, so I'm sorry about that. I hope that maybe some of you can join. Maybe some of you may be able to speak English, or maybe through some friends or family that can help. They're also posted on the website, so they can be viewed and the slides can be downloaded. So if you go on our website, feel free to again also connect for these webinars. Right now, the study is open for enrollment in the US. I know that some people from Central and South America actually enrolled, especially some of our southern sites, especially some sites in Florida. I know that there is some travel involved, so I don't know how feasible that might be for most of you. But again, that, technically speaking, it's a possibility, but that would imply a lot of travel to the US. So I think that at this point, obviously that's there's a barrier there. But, we did have a few people who came, especially people who have family in the US that can potentially enroll. If not, again, we are available on the web every Thursday, and the recordings are also available on our website. So even if you cannot participate, certainly we're happy to provide you with weekly updates about the trial and the results. We're also able to really leverage the input from many colleagues from the US, and we have also some colleagues who also speak Spanish, and again, they're being great site investigators and have connected with some patients from Central and South America as well. I do want to talk about the fact that the trial is also a unique opportunity to learn more about ALS biomarkers and ALS in general. This is important for us because, in addition to testing drugs, we also want to really learn more about ALS so that we can make progress faster. So we're learning about ALS genetics. That's why we do whole genome sequencing from every participant. We're learning a lot about neurofilaments. You may have heard the news of a drug that was recently approved for SOD1 associated ALS based on the results on neurofilaments. That's why we collect and measure neurofilaments from everyone, because we also want to be able to tell if the drugs that we're testing do affect the neurofilaments. So definitely that's part of the program. I do want to spend a minute on a couple of digital biomarkers that we're using. So when we talk about digital biomarkers, what that means is that we can also monitor people in the home environment by using apps that they download on their cell phone. And then we use them to collect some metrics. And I want to talk specifically about our positive experience with home spirometry, which was critical during the pandemic, because during the pandemic, we couldn't really bring people in for some of the pulmonary function tests because they were restricted during the pandemic, because there was concern that just by doing the respiratory maneuvers, one could potentially spread COVID-19. And so we did that. We basically, we were able to still obtain results about home tests, about respiratory function tests, but we did that in the home environment. So we gave every participant a spirometer. It's a small device. You can see a picture on the slide. And we compared in-clinic measurements to home measurements. Some people were still able to come to clinic. And so when we compared the two, we realized that there is an excellent correlation between the two. And so all of this experience is really adding to our toolkit in terms of how to monitor patients in the home. And now many people are also doing this, using this clinically, so that we can reduce the need to travel to the clinic. Now, I want to spend a few minutes about our first regimen results. So regimens are drugs, so specific drugs that were tested. We have results for the first 4, A, B, C, and D, and instead for the other ones, they're still ongoing, so we don't have results. So today I can spend a minute talking about the results from the first few regimens. So the first regimen, regimen A, that tested zilucoplan, unfortunately was not positive. In fact, it was stopped early for futility. And while this was obviously disappointing, disappointing, and we know now that zilucoplan, this complement inhibitor, doesn't work for ALS, and other complement inhibitors from other trials have also been discontinued. The fact that we were able to do this quickly, it's definitely speaks to the efficiency of the platform trial. By doing this, by stopping early for futility, we could save a lot of study visits and operational activities. The second drug also was screened out and had negative results. So now we know that verdiperstat doesn't work. But again, while this is disappointing, it's actually positive that we were able to rapidly screen out two drugs that otherwise would have taken many more years to be tested. Now, the next two regimens, regimen C and D, instead had positive results and are moving forward to a phase 3 testing. So let me tell you about those. Regimen C, CNM-Au8, works on energy production. And really one of the goals of this study was to identify the right dosage. So this was the only regimen of the ones included that tested two dosages, 30 milligrams and 60 milligrams. Now, the primary analysis had negative results. However, when we looked at other metrics, we saw that the dose of 30 milligrams was associated with consistent trends with reduction in risk of death or permanent assisted ventilation in this study. So these results are exciting, but they need to be confirmed. So we, in this regimen, we identified the dose, 30 milligrams daily. That was, again, one of the goals of the trial, to identify the right dose, and we did that. And then, because we are looking now at potentially prolonging survival and reducing the need for permanent assisted ventilation, we need another trial. We need a longer phase 3 trial to confirm these findings. And so that's in the planning stages. The last regimen, regimen D, testing predopidine or sigma-1 receptor agonist, was really the first time that we tested predopidine in an ALS population. And so a goal of the trial was also to identify the right endpoints and the right groups of participants that are more likely to respond to predopidine. Now, when we looked at the entire regimen data, there were no differences in the primary or key secondary endpoints. However, we had a number of exploratory and subgroup analyses that were positive, and I want to explain that in a second. So first of all, predopidine improved objective measures of speech function in the full analysis set, meaning in all regimen participants. That was measured by using a digital app. So that's one of the smartphone apps that I mentioned earlier that were included, so that we could actually record speech and monitor speech progression at home via a smartphone app. So that was positive. Obviously, these results need to be confirmed in a different trial, but again, it was exciting to see. It was also exciting to see that with this app, we could effectively monitor patients in the home environment, which had not been done before in a clinical trial. We also looked at pre-specified subgroup analysis, trying to see which are the subgroups of patients that are more likely to respond. And we saw that people with early disease and definite ALS, so people who were early in their disease course, were more likely to respond, both in terms of functional scores and quality of life scores. Again, these results need to be confirmed in a larger trial, but it was very interesting to see these trends. Same trends were seen for neurofilament, where we saw that in fast progressing participants, treatment seemed to reduce neurofilament. Again, something that needs to be confirmed, but certainly exciting results. So I think the next steps for predopidine are really to confirm these results in a phase 3 trial. And the goal of this phase 2 trial that I just presented was met, in the sense that we identified important endpoints and got a lot of information about the target population that will help inform the phase 3 trial. So what's next? So I just quickly recapped the first 3 years of the platform trial, when we went from initial launch, really doing something very new for the community, and really now continuing to grow it. So let me tell you where we are going with this. So first of all, this graph shows the number of ALS clinical trials that are enrolling in the US. I'm talking of trials in the phase 2 to 3 space. As you can see, when you look at the x-axis shows sort of the time over the last 20 years. When you just look at the sheer number of of drugs and trials that are being tested, you can see that the number of drugs in development for ALS is really increasing exponentially. Right now, there's about 25 trials that are, in development, at least in the US. And just, a few years ago, even just before the pandemic, there were just a few, only a handful of drugs. So it's incredibly important for us to do trials more efficiently, and certainly the platform trial is contributing to that. Since we launched in the summer of 2020, we were able to screen out 2 drugs, A and B. We were able to move 2 drugs to phase 3 testing, C and D. We're now testing regimen E, that's still ongoing, so we should have the results by the end of the year. I will be more than happy to come back before the end of the year once we have the results for regimen D. And then we are also enrolling for regimens F and G. So that's starting now. And again, we'll have the results hopefully next year. I also want to mention that we are sharing our experience with many other groups. So for those of you who are interested also in other disease areas, we are definitely sharing all our learnings, and other groups are also setting up their platform trials really worldwide. So to summarize, platform trials are becoming popular because they have a lot of advantages over traditional trials. They're faster, they make a more efficient use of resources, they can provide a lot of natural history results, and they can serve as a biomarker development engine. The Healey ALS platform trial is an adaptive perpetual phase 2/3 trial. We launched in 2020. We have been enrolling at over 70 sites. We have included 7 investigational drugs so far, and really over 1,000 participants. And additional regimens are ongoing. So we continue to grow, we continue to learn. Initial learnings included go, no-go decisions for the first few regimens. And we continue to learn about biomarkers and endpoints, and we continue to share. We're also adapting the trial, and so more to come on this, and I will be happy to be back with more news. So this trial is really dedicated to all people living with ALS, whether you're participating in the trial or just supporting the ALS field. We're really grateful to everyone who is really coming together to make this happen. I really believe that by working together, we can really make a big impact, and we can really make progress soon in our search for new treatments for ALS. So with that, I just wanted to thank our collaborators again. I'm here presenting, but this is not just my trial. This is a large teamwork, really team effort. And I will be happy to take your questions.
Excellent, Sabrina. Thank you so much for that. Very clear and very comprehensive, very, as always. This is the 3rd time that you speak to us, so we are really grateful for that. And okay, let's start with some questions. So when we say that a platform trial makes things faster and more efficient, it seems like everyone should be doing that. Everyone should be testing drugs on a platform trial, but maybe the platform trial design has a couple of challenges, or maybe that depends on what kind of trial are you designing, or what kind of compound are you testing? Can you expound a little bit more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So absolutely, there needs to be some conditions for the platform trial to be, advantageous. And so in ALS, as I said earlier, the reason that we thought this was really the perfect time for an ALS trial is because we have so many drugs in development. And so it makes sense that many of them are in the same stage. It makes sense to work collaboratively to make this happen. Now, there are also drugs that are for very specific populations, or they're very early in development. Some of those drugs may involve more invasive procedures, or may be really early in development, and we just need to do, small trials, for example, for safety, or for other, to move them along the path of drug development. And so for those drugs, a platform trial may not be the best fit at this time. It could be in the future, but they need to go through, for example, phase 1, first in human testing. Some of the more complicated gene therapies or other drugs like that, they may need to go through previous testing before being ready for something like the platform trial, just because they're so new. But again, I think that we have a lot of conversations with companies and the community, and we really, I'm not saying that the platform, I'm not saying that every drug should go to the platform trial. I'm just saying, we really want to be able to offer this to advance development faster for drugs that are in that stage of development.
Perfect, clear. So last time we talked, it was right before AMX got approved by the FDA. So and finally we got the big news. We got positive news in September, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And so what can you comment on that? I'm sure you were very happy because you were very much involved in that trial.
Absolutely. That was a fantastic trial. Really, for me, it's always been, I'll always remember that because it was really an incredible academia industry partnership. We've been working closely with Amelix Pharmaceuticals. They're really a fantastic company that's really moving things along efficiently. And I'm very happy that the drug was approved in the US. I hope that, it will also be approved in other countries soon. And different countries have different regulatory requirements. So there are different laws or regulations for drugs to be approved. And so we continue to learn about AMX35. It's now available in some countries, specifically in Canada and in the US. There is another trial that's ongoing, a phase 3 trial that's ongoing mostly in Europe, again, to provide more data. So fingers crossed that everything continues to progress. And I'm hoping that, again, we'll continue to learn positive things and we'll continue to expand access to other countries.
Great. So you just mentioned during your presentation that you already moved regimens C and D to phase 3. Is that already happening? We know that A and B were not positive, but regimens C and D are being moved to phase 3. Is that already happening?
So that's in the planning stages. So each compound is made by a different company. So we work together collaboratively as partners to expedite this phase 2 trial, which is the platform trial. And now each company can take their compound with these data now available to them to start a phase 3 trial. So obviously we would love to collaborate with them on the phase 3 trial as well. That's not part of the platform trial. There will be a separate trial, a phase 3 trial that each company can provide. And so I think both are in the planning stages. I don't have more detailed information about when exactly that's going to start or what it's going to look like. But certainly the data from the platform trial are critical in terms of informing the design of the next phase.
Okay, thank you. And as regards the international approach of the Healey platform trial, you did mention in your presentation that in order for participants from other parts of the world, they need to travel, and there's a lot of travel involved, which makes it a bit challenging, of course. Is there any planning on remote participation for any of the regimens in the trial?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I would say yes and no, in the sense that we do have options for remote participation to some extent. Nevertheless, some visits must happen in person. And the reason for that is that, there's a lot of biomarkers, biosamples that need to be taken, again, to really be able to tell if the drug works or not. So unfortunately, we cannot do this completely remotely. There's certainly some flexibility built in, but unfortunately, some visits must happen in person.
But in the future, we can say that it's feasible for someone from other country to send samples by courier or just ship the samples and do some remote visits. And combine that with a couple of in-person visits. That seems to be feasible, right? Like a combination, like a hybrid.
Yes, a combination could definitely be possible. I would say, that also these drugs, we also have a lot of safety monitoring, etc. So it gets a little bit complicated if people are very remote or very far away. Also to get, all kind of all types of information that we need to collect. I do hope that we will be able to also expand to other countries in terms of enrolling, having sites in other countries. Again, quite frankly, all of this is possible. It's just a matter of resources and sort of really, effort and resources to make this happen.
So just 2 days ago, we had a very nice talk with Dr. Scheffner, Dr. Jeremy
Oh,
Scheffner.
wonderful.
Yes, and one of the things he said, because I asked him about when can we finally test this combination of all these drugs that are being approved. When can we know exactly what or have a very approximate idea of the effectiveness of this cocktail between riluzole and edaravone and AMX? And he said that that's kind of complicated actually, because you need like 7 or 8 arms to design that trial. But what's your take on that?
No, it's absolutely right. So if we want to really do a head-to-head comparison and really test in a rigorous way, who does better, right? The people who are only on 1, 2, 3, and which combination, then that would take a lot of arms, right? And so that would be incredibly hard to do. And also we would have to ask people not to take one of them, if that makes sense. In other words, people would have to agree to only take 1 or 2, etc. And instead, most people want to have access to most options. So I think that, that's a difficult trial to do. Again, if you want to do it kind of the best possible way from a statistical perspective. I do think that in now that these drugs are on the market, there is really the possibility for at least gathering some data. Again, not a formal trial because that would be very complicated, but we can gather some data. So, for example, people who participate in our regimens F and G, the new regimens that we are enrolling for, they can take all those drugs, and we stratify them. So what it means is that we put the same number of people on certain background medications in the active arm compared to the people in the placebo arm. That is not a test of which drug is better or what combination is better, but at least we can ensure that there's balance between the groups. And so if there's any safety signal or concern or some sort of interaction, we could potentially gather some data and some information just because, again, we are including kind of very rigorous processes. So it's not a perfect test of, what's the optimal combination, but at least we can gather data in terms of what happens in the real world when we give these combinations. And I'm sure that a lot of clinical effectiveness studies and real world evidence studies will come up. It's a new problem to have in ALS because now, now we have more than one drug. We only had one for a long time. And so this was not so much of an issue, but now I think we need to think carefully about how to gather data from the real world to see, who is, what's the real effect of these combos.
Clear, of course. Okay, so finally, again, last time we talked, we had only 2 drugs approved around the world, and now that we talk again, just a few months after that, we have 4. I mean,
Right.
3 for the general ALS population, and there is 1 for a specific population, SOD1.
Right.
So things are getting really, really exciting.
Absolutely.
What will be your message of hope for our patients and persons living with ALS and all the families and all the carers?
Yeah, I would say that the research field has never been as active in ALS as it is right now. As I showed on the graph, just 5 years ago, maybe there were 4 or 5 trials that were ongoing. Now we have 25. So when you have more shots on goal, obviously things are going to happen faster simply because we're doing more. We're testing more things. We have better trials. We have more knowledge. We continue to generate knowledge. So while yes, it takes some time, and that's disappointing. And it also takes time for actually accessing these drugs, after the trial results have been published, and really disseminate these drugs around the world. There's certainly great activity. So I'm very hopeful that we will see more approvals in a relatively short time frame. So I think over the next few months or, a couple of years, I'm sure that we'll see other approvals again because the field has really accelerated.
Absolutely, and that's great news. Okay, Sabrina,
Thank you.
thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Again, this is the third time that you're taking part of your very busy schedule to share some time with us and present about these very important topics. So again, thank you for sharing with us this information, and thank you for working with ALS every day of your life, and thank you for pushing things forward. Because we many times we heard that our community needed a win, needed a couple of victories, and we are getting a couple of victories.
Right.
We're getting a couple of good results now.
I agree.
So we are looking forward to talking to you very soon again about the Healey platform or any other trial that you're working on. And so hopefully we will see you in Basel, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, yes, I'll be there.
Hopefully we will. So thank you again, Dr. Paganoni, for this. On behalf of the Argentine ALS community, and on behalf of the rest of the Spanish-speaking countries that usually listen to our conferences, thank you so much.
Thank you again, and hope to see you soon.
I will see you soon. Take care.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you. Bye.